Right now, across the American Midwest and the rolling hills of the Appalachians, there is a plant often dismissed as a common roadside weed that holds a secret hidden in plain sight. It produces an oil so potent that nearly 60% of its total volume is composed of alpha-linolenic acid, the essential omega-3 fatty acid our bodies cannot produce on their own. To put that into perspective, this plant produces a higher concentration of omega-3 fatty acids than flaxseed, and it dwarfs the levels found in the farm-raised salmon we spend billions of dollars to cultivate every year. For thousands of years, this was the golden engine of nutrition across the East, fueling the cognitive development of empires and providing the clean energy necessary for survival in harsh mountain climates. In the mid-19th century, it was introduced to American soil as a prized ornamental, loved by Victorian gardeners for its deep, royal purple foliage and its ability to thrive where others failed. But by the 1950s, the narrative shifted. This biological marvel was suddenly recast as a toxic invader, an enemy of the pasture, and a threat to the industrial monocultures that were beginning to swallow the American landscape. Why did modern agriculture walk away from the most efficient omega-3 engine on the planet? Why did our food system spend 70 years trying to bury a nutritional goldmine? This is where our story begins. This plant, known to history as the beefsteak plant, is officially called perilla. If you are ready to reclaim the lost knowledge of our ancestors and discover the superfoods growing in your own backyard, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. But to understand how this plant became a ghost in our own fields, we have to look back at the thousands of years it spent as the literal lifeblood of civilization. Archaeological evidence from Neolithic settlements on the Korean peninsula at sites like Chulman reveals charred perilla seeds dating back to 3500 BC. This suggests that humans were not just foraging for this plant. They were actively managing and selecting it for its high oil content 5,000 years ago. It was a crop of absolute utility. The seeds were pressed into a golden oil used for cooking and for lanterns. The stalks were used for fiber and the leaves were used for medicine. In the Buddhist temples of Korea and China, perilla became a cornerstone of temple food. Because monks adhered to a strict vegetarian diet, they needed a source of fats that could provide the satiety and brain fuel required for long hours of meditation and labor. Perilla oil, with its rich, nutty flavor, became the replacement for animal fats. It was not just food, it was a spiritual tool for cognitive focus. Beyond the kitchen, the oil had industrial applications that seem like science fiction today. When applied to paper, perilla oil polymerizes and creates a waterproof seal. This made it the primary material for traditional umbrellas and oil paper windows, essentially acting as a renewable biological plastic long before the invention of petroleum. When the plant traveled to the United States in the mid-1800s, it was welcomed with open arms. Victorian-era Americans were fascinated by its deep burgundy and purple leaves, and it became a common sight in elite ornamental gardens. It was appreciated for its beefsteak appearance, a name given because the textured, dark red leaves resembled a cut of meat. For nearly a century, perilla lived as a quiet, respected guest in American soil, valued for its beauty and its hardy nature. It was a plant of the people, easily shared via seed swapping, existing outside the reach of commercial markets. If this plant was so integral to human survival for 5 millennia, how did it go from being a sacred temple oil to a targeted enemy of the state? It began in the mid-20th century, and it was not an accident. Following World War II, the American agricultural landscape underwent a massive reorganization. The focus shifted toward large-scale, mechanized monocultures of soybeans and corn. These crops were ideal for the burgeoning industrial food system because they could be harvested by massive combines and were compatible with the new era of broad-spectrum herbicides. Perilla, being an open-pollinated plant that thrives in the margins and refuses to grow in neat, predictable rows, was a poor fit for the factory farm model. In the 1950s and the 1960s, agricultural extension offices began labeling perilla as a noxious weed. The primary justification was the presence of a compound called perilla ketone. Research published in journals such as Veterinary and Human Toxicology in the 1980s showed that when cattle graze on large quantities of perilla in a dry pasture, The ketone can cause acute respiratory distress syndrome, also called pulmonary edema. While this is a legitimate concern for cattle ranchers, the scientific nuance was lost in public messaging. Instead of educating farmers on pasture management, the USDA and local agencies branded the entire species as a toxic pest that needed to be eradicated with chemical sprays. By defining perilla as a dangerous weed, the path was cleared for the dominance of the soybean oil industry. Perilla oil is a superior source of omega-3s, but it is much harder to process on a global industrial scale because it is highly reactive and has a shorter shelf life in transparent plastic bottles. Soybean oil, while lower in nutritional quality, is chemically stable and vastly more profitable for large-scale processors like ADM and Cargill. We traded a high-performance perennial-style oil for a low-performance industrial oil because the latter was easier to control, patent, and ship across the globe. But does the science actually support the claims of the ancestors? Or was it all just folklore when we look at the raw data? The nutritional density of perilla is almost staggering. 100 drig of perilla seeds, about 3 and 1/2 oz, contains approximately 35 to 45 grain of total oil. Within that oil, the concentration of alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, consistently ranges between 54 to 64%. If you were to consume just 100 grams of these seeds, you would be ingesting roughly 25 grams of ALA. In the 1990s, Dr. Artemis Simopoulos, a leading authority on omega-3 fatty acids, began pointing out the massive imbalance in the modern Western diet. We are flooded with omega-6 oils from corn and soy, which drive chronic inflammation while our omega-3 levels have plummeted. This imbalance is linked to everything from heart disease to cognitive decline. Perilla was the natural corrective to this problem. Modern research is now looking at perilla oil as a potential treatment for asthma and inflammatory bowel disease. A study published in the journal Oriental Pharmacy and Experimental Medicine in 2011 highlighted that perilla oil's unique fatty acid profile can actually alter the lipid composition of our cell membranes, making them more resilient to oxidative stress. This is not just a garnish on a sushi plate, it is a biological shield. But because perilla is an open pollinated plant that anyone can grow for the cost of a $3 packet of seeds, there is no incentive for the pharmaceutical industry to fund the massive human trials required for formal FDA drug approval. It remains in the supplement shadows, a victim of its own accessibility. But the leaves of the perilla plant are a pharmaceutical laboratory in their own right. They are one of the most concentrated natural sources of rosmarinic acid, a polyphenol that significantly inhibits the symptoms of seasonal allergies by blocking inflammatory leukotrienes. Furthermore, the leaves contain peraldehyde, a potent antimicrobial agent. Research has confirmed that peraldehyde is effective at neutralizing specific foodborne pathogens, including Staphylococcus aureus. 100 grams of fresh leaves provides about 500 millimeter and substantial amounts of vitamin C and beta-carotene. Crucially, when we compare perilla to a standard health food like spinach, a major advantage emerges. Spinach is famous for its iron, but it is also loaded with oxalates, compounds that can contribute to kidney stones and block the absorption of minerals. Research indicates that perilla leaves have a significantly lower oxalate content than spinach. This means the calcium and magnesium in perilla are more bioavailable, allowing your body to actually use the nutrients instead of having them bound up by plant toxins. It is a cleaner, more efficient fuel for the human body. However, even the most powerful superfoods require caution. While perilla is a nutritional titan, there are individuals who should exercise care. If you are pregnant or breastfeeding, there is currently insufficient clinical data regarding high-level consumption, and you should consult with a healthcare professional. Additionally, because perilla can have a mild sedative effect in some individuals, those currently taking sedative medications or undergoing surgery should be aware that it may enhance the effects of those drugs. With a nutritional profile this powerful, the question then becomes, how do we stop treating this as a weed and start growing it as a staple in our own gardens? If you want to bring this power back into your life, you just need a small patch of dirt and a bit of sunlight. Perilla is incredibly hardy, flourishing in USDA hardiness zones 4 through 10. It is a member of the mint family, which means it has a square stem and an aggressive will to live. It thrives in disturbed soil and is one of the few superfoods that actually prefers partial shade, making it perfect for those corners of your yard where your tomatoes and peppers always seem to struggle. Because perilla seeds have a relatively short viability, it is critical to get fresh seeds from reputable sources. I recommend looking at Kitazawa Seed Company or True Leaf Market. Once you have your seeds, the foolproof method for growing is fall sowing. In nature, perilla drops its seeds in the fall, and they sit in the cold ground all winter, a process called cold stratification. Simply scatter your seeds on the surface of the soil in late fall and lightly press them in. Do not bury them deep. They need a bit of light to wake up in the spring. When the soil warms in late April or May, they will pop up like a lush purple carpet. To maximize the anti-inflammatory rosmarinic acid in the volatile peraldehyde, harvest the leaves in the mid-morning, just after the dew has evaporated, but before the midday sun begins to bake off the essential oils. The leaves can be used fresh in salads, where their low oxalate content helps you absorb the minerals, or they can be fermented in a soy-based brine, a traditional Korean method that preserves medicinal polyphenols for months. The true energy payoff, however, lies within the seeds themselves. Once the flower spikes turn brittle and golden brown in late fall, harvest the seeds by threshing, simply beating the dried spikes over a bucket, and then winnowing away the light husks in the wind. To turn these tiny, oil-dense seeds into liquid gold, use a stainless steel home cold press machine. Unlike industrial processing, which uses chemical solvents and high heat, a home cold press keeps the temperature below 120 degrees Fahrenheit or roughly 50 degrees Celsius. This is critical because the alpha-linolenic acid in perilla is highly sensitive to heat. Once it reaches a smoke point, those fragile omega-3 bonds break down, turning a healing oil into a pro-inflammatory one. 1 kilo of dried seeds, about 2.2 lbb, will typically yield 350 to 450 milliliter of oil, or roughly 12 to 15 Oz. This fresh, cold-pressed oil should be stored immediately in dark glass bottles and kept in the refrigerator, as its high potency makes it prone to rapid oxidation. In the kitchen, this oil is never used for high-heat frying. Instead, it is used as a finishing oil, drizzled over warm grains or vegetables to preserve the structural integrity of the fats that fueled the monks and emperors of the past. Right now, as global supply chains become more fragile and the quality of our industrial oils continues to decline, the perilla plant stands as a quiet sentinel of self-reliance. It offers the world's most concentrated source of plant-based omega-3s, a natural defense against the modern epidemic of allergies, and a beautiful, resilient addition to any garden, all for the price of zero maintenance. We were taught to call this plant a weed because a weed is simply a plant whose virtues have been suppressed for the sake of a more profitable alternative. Planting perilla is a choice to feed your brain and your body with a fuel that has not been processed, bleached, or deodorized in a factory. It is the choice to reclaim a piece of our shared human history. If this story has changed the way you perceive the common weeds in your garden, please subscribe and like the channel. We are digging up the history they tried to bury. Let's cultivate the future together. The next hidden treasure of our ancestors will be revealed soon.